Hey scholars, this is a PowerPoint lecture video for chapters 6 and 7 for public speaking on choosing topics and then research. So please make sure you have the PowerPoint presentation available out in front of you as you're listening to this, following along, taking notes. The one I provided for you, the PowerPoint I provided for you, has some notes on the notes pages, and as I've always mentioned, I recommend taking some form of notes either in the PowerPoint presentation itself or your own form of note taking. So you're going to hear some overlap in this video in terms of what I was discussing in the informative speech assignment video, where I talk about topic selection and choosing topics specifically. That one assignment that's part of the whole informative speech is submitting 3 potential speech topics. So this is obviously related to that. So first things first, that second slide, or slide number 2. Some questions that come to mind: who are you speaking to? Why am I here? What's your purpose? Like why are you doing the speech? Well, of course, I explain those things in videos, and then they're on the assignments. But it's important to know some broader elements of giving speeches, and then of course these chapters talk about very specific elements of giving speeches. So there's generally 3 purposes to speak: inform, persuade, or entertain. In this class, you're primarily giving speeches on informing and persuading. And maybe in a more advanced public speaking class, you might do a lot more speeches where you're doing toasts or after dinner speeches or that kind of thing. But anyhow, informing and persuading. So one of the most important things is choosing a good topic. So what makes a good topic? The authors talk about all these components of what they believe make a good topic, which makes sense. One is that it's important to you. So as I mentioned before, try to find a topic that's really significant to you, that you really enjoy. You're going to be working with this a lot. Like the authors say on that page 108, if you don't care about the subject, it will be very hard to make it interesting or important to the audience. So if you don't care about it that much, you don't like it that much, you don't like it that much, or you're not passionate about it, it makes it more challenging to present it in a way that's interesting. They provide you these different examples of things that are important to the speaker because of an experience they had. They mentioned the example of Philip Marcus being angry because he saw someone cheating during a closed book exam. And so that's something that I relate to, because I had a student several years ago, I had a student disclose this to me, where she was in a classroom and she witnessed this thing happen where she studied for this exam and she saw students in front of her cheating and the professor didn't know. And so now she has had this passion, this fire inside of her with regards to academic integrity and doing the right thing. That you'll see that note on 109 where it says, in choosing a topic of personal interest, be careful that your own interest doesn't harden into bias. So that's mostly relevant for persuasive speeches. So it's still relevant for informative speeches. Don't choose something that's that might be an inappropriate topic. But bottom line, make sure you choose something that's interesting to you. Along the same lines, choose something that's interesting and relevant to the audience. So considering your audience in mind, is this relevant to them? Is there a connection to them? If you look at that rhetorical workout on page 109 on the bottom, that box that says estimate audience interest in your topic, look at those last few bullet points where it says, does the topic offer a solution to a puzzle or problem that affects your audience? Why not? Or how so? Does the topic offer a way to connect something unfamiliar to what your audience already knows? Explain how so. So those are some things to keep in mind as you're choosing a topic, especially for persuasive speech topic. Is the issue, the problem I'm dealing with, is it relevant for the audience? If not, how do I make it relevant to the audience? How do I choose a topic and use language in a way such that the audience has that aha moment, like, oh, okay, I see why you chose a topic. I see how that relates to me and how it affects me and how my behaviors, how me not doing things might make it worse, or how me doing things might make it better, so on and so forth. So be thinking of your audience in mind, and of course, is it worthy of being heard? If you have something good to say, then say it, right? If you don't have something good to say, then don't say it. But in the case of this assignment, no matter what, you have to have something to say. So try to choose wisely. Try to choose a topic that you think the audience is going to really enjoy, and then obviously that's appropriate and that follows the assignment expectations. And then I have that clarity. Make sure you're clear. Make sure you're explaining things well. Make sure that the nature of your topic is is well known and understood in terms of the way that you explain it and present it. Next slide, slide 5, in terms of appropriateness. Make sure you choose a topic that's appropriate. The authors mentioned these things like scope, oral delivery, rhetorical situation. If you're choosing a topic, can you cover enough information about that topic within the scope of time that you have, right? You're developing a speech and you're spending a few weeks, or several weeks developing an outline, developing ideas and research, and you're putting together a sorry. Okay, so you're only doing so much. You only have so much time and you only have so many resources to develop a speech like this. If you were preparing a 20-minute TED Talk and you had 6 months to work on it, then you're going to have probably a different topic. And then oral delivery. They basically talk about some topics, some things are better left written about versus some things just sound better in a story form. One example of that is I had a student years ago give a speech on homeowners insurance. It was a college classroom. Most of the students in the audience were between 18 and 20, and so the whole speech was on homeowners insurance, and it was very detailed and thorough. And she obviously knew her topic really, really well. But it's one of those things where it's like, well, you didn't need to give a speech on that topic. You could have just written about that in some form or fashion. And then the rhetorical situation. Considering the situation. The authors are commenting on the nature of choosing controversial topics. So that's one that, again, that's really going to only be relevant for the persuasive speeches. For the informative speeches, your primary goal is teacher, educator, you're enlightening us. So the nature of controversy is not as relevant for that type of speech. But do read through this thoroughly, and they're talking about the bottom of 110. The question is not whether to select them, but how to develop them. So if you have an idea, if you have a topic and you think it might be somewhat controversial, the focus is, how do I develop this? How do I execute this? How do I choose a topic and present it in a way that is appropriate to the situation? And it might be challenging. For years, I heard speeches on students were giving persuasive speeches on why they think cannabis should be legalized, why cannabis, weed, marijuana should be legalized. So before it was legal in various medical reasons or recreational reasons, I heard a lot of speeches on this topic. Most of them weren't that good, but every once in a while, a student would present a very, very well researched presentation on this topic, and did so in a way where, hey, it's controversial. They acknowledge all these different things, but the speaker was impartial, and that, like, to the point where I can't even tell if you're for or against this. You're doing such a good job at maintaining impartiality. Versus, I had some students who didn't really do academic research. They seemed to know a lot about the topic, and it was obvious how they felt about it in terms of their facial expressions and how they were talking about it, their tone of voice, and all those types of things. And then I remember one student ending a speech on this topic. Mind you, this is almost 10 years ago, but the way he ended the speech was something along the lines of, and what I think the world needs now is for everyone just to sit down and smoke a J. Something along those lines. And he got a chuckle from the class, but that it was not a well executed speech. His speech did not do a good job of handling a controversial issue. So basically, you want to avoid divisiveness. If this is the authors talk about, don't choose the topics that have been overdone, the topics that have divided worlds and countries and polarized types of things, the types of topics that people just they just go in circles. Conversations you've had with people on topics where you're not getting anywhere. Well, part of the logic is don't choose a topic that's that challenging and that difficult for this assignment. Choose something that's more manageable. And frankly, when it comes to these really big, controversial, hot topics that the world is divided over, one way to think about it is, at the risk of sounding like I don't think you can handle something, it's kind of like you're probably not going to solve that problem in a 6-minute speech, right? Especially in a intro level public speaking class. hey, if you're a world-class debater and you were on the high school debate team, on the college debate team, and this is your topic that you know really, really well, that's another situation, but that's extremely rare. Okay, moving on to slide 6. So once you determine your general purpose, the idea is to determine your specific purpose. So a specific purpose statement is basically a statement that provides a preview of what will be accomplished, what will be done in your speech. It's just basically a preview of the speech. And you list it on your outline, and of course you mention that in your speech somewhere in the introduction, towards the end. It's basically the transition from the end of your introduction into the beginning of the body of the speech into main point 1. So based on this one, looking at slide 6, I'm going to inform you about the history, varieties, and cultural significance of chocolate. Doesn't have to be long, but that's very detailed. Now I know from that main point 1 is going to be the history of chocolate. Main point 2 is going to be about chocolate varieties. Main point 3, cultural significance of chocolate. But you use that strategically, after you got the audience's attention, you pause, and then you give a detailed but somewhat concise preview of what will be covered in the speech. That's the very specific purpose of your speech. Identifying the purpose is that now we're on to a little bit of a different topic, and you'll see the structure here in my PowerPoint presentation the structures that I have doesn't always follow the format and the structure in the chapters. This is the way that I want to present the information. I'm not necessarily criticizing the textbook. That's just how I want to do it. Anyhow, so page 115 talks about developing a strategic plan. So what is your purpose other than, I'm informing the audience about chocolate? Like what exactly, like the bigger purpose, what exactly do you want your audience to take away from this? Now, for an informative speech, it might be an enrichment of knowledge on your topic to enlighten us. So 1 and 2, providing, I'm on page 115, providing new information or perspective, agenda setting. The authors talk about agenda setting, where it's like, after my speech, my topic should be sort of at the forefront of your mind. Based on what I accomplished in my speech, I was able to get you to at least think about it. In an informative speech, I'm remaining neutral, and I'm not trying to get you to change your mind about anything. But in a persuasive speech, I definitely want you to be thinking about that topic. And then with 4, 5, 6, and 7, now we're talking specifically about persuasive, the different types of purposes and goals within a persuasive speech. So number 3, creating positive or negative feeling. That might happen in an informative speech. After you're listening to your informative speech, hey, maybe I have a positive feeling or negative feeling, but that is not the goal. As an informative speaker, your goal is not necessarily to create positive feelings or negative feelings. Your goal is to inform us. If we develop positive or negative feelings after hearing your speech, then that's almost like it's best to think of that as an unintended consequence. My goal is not to get you to think that this is the best basketball player ever. My goal is to educate you, to enlighten you on this basketball player, to tell you things that you didn't know about this basketball player. If the end result is it makes you happy, cool. But that's not my goal. My goal is not to get you to think, hey, this is the best basketball player. That's not my speech. The speech is inform, enlighten, educate. Hopefully that helps. But in a persuasive speech, I'm definitely, so it's a lot different in persuasion. I'm most definitely trying to get you to experience positive or negative feelings. And I do that through the use of emotional appeal, using pathos. Emotional appeal, we'll have information on that later. Or strengthening commitment. I might give a speech where I'm trying to get you to commit to something, or reinforce a commitment to something, like exercise. If I'm trying to explain the importance of exercise, or developing other types of like positive habits that are good for your body, or pro-social habits that are good for human communication and relationships, etc. Or weakening commitment. Number 5, weakening commitment. Maybe I want to weaken your commitment to something that you do that maybe has toxic effects, something like watching an excessive amount of TV, or relying on things, or smoking cigarettes, or something like that. And then conversion. Strengthening commitment, weakening commitment, conversion, inducing a specific action, they're all sort of related, but they're all different as well. Conversion is like, my goal is to persuade everyone to stop using uh, bottled water and to purchase a refillable water bottle. So I'm trying to convert you, and I don't shy away from that. If that's my goal, my purpose is I want everyone to stop using bottled water, to eliminate the purchase and use of bottled water. I'm trying to get you to convert from that way of living to, hey, use this refillable water bottle. That's conversion. And then inducing a specific action um, would be something like blood donation. Buying a refillable water bottle, that's also a specific action. But the mindset, the psychology is a little bit different. I'm trying to convert you from doing one way, from how you're doing one thing, and to get you to do it a different way. Whereas inducing a specific action, number 7, blood donation. I'm not trying to convert you. I'm trying to get you um, to donate blood. It's assuming that you're not like anti-blood donation and you've always been anti-blood donation. I'm trying to convert you. That's really not the case in this. So hopefully that helps the bigger nature of the purpose of a speech. The authors talk about having a strategic plan. So hopefully one of the things that you're getting from this textbook, and just the nature of creating speeches, is it's all about strategy. It's not random. You don't just randomly put words together. You don't randomly put thoughts together. Hey, here's a speech. No, it's like you have a plan, have a strategic plan. Identify the constraints, audiences, your audience analysis, your ethos, the topic, the rhetorical situation. So what types of roadblocks might you hit in accomplishing this task of creating a speech? One thing the authors mentioned is your ethos as a speaker. So one constraint might be this idea that, oh my gosh, I'm not an expert on this topic. I just read a little bit about this topic. So if I'm presenting a speech to a group of people who are all, let's say, much wiser than I am on this topic, one constraint is my perception of my own ethos. Because I know I've only been reading about this topic for a short amount of time, and everyone else is an expert. So that's a constraint with perhaps confidence or something like that. So there's all different types of constraints. Read through these in here, and as one comes up, as you're developing the speech, as you're developing your ideas, as you're rehearsing your speech, you might hit a roadblock. Figure out how to work through that is the idea. Review this PowerPoint, review the information in the textbook, etc. Identifying the opportunities. What are the opportunities that are basically consistent with your topic, and then selecting the means. So the question is, how are you going to do all this? How do you organize things? How do you structure things? How are you going to execute all the minor details? Definitely read through that thing on the top of page 22 or 122. Choose a strategy, identifying constraints and opportunities. All those boxes, the boxes and tables and charts and figures, those are great. They have a lot of really useful information. So that means, how are you actually going to do everything? The emotional language, the wording, the materials, like all the minor details. It's like the finishing, the finishing touches, so to speak. So back onto specific purpose statement. Here's some examples. I have some examples of a specific purpose statement. So slide 9. Here's one example of a specific purpose statement. I can read that, and again, once I read this specific purpose statement, I should know that one of the main goals of this statement is that it tells me the structure of the speech. It tells me what each main point is going to be. Main point 1, what happens during the treatment. Main point 2, how it works, and so on and so forth. Some guidelines. The authors have some guidelines in the textbook. You can just do a Google search, and you can find out different ways of developing specific purpose statements. Even YouTube, if you just utilize YouTube, you type in specific purpose statements for public speaking, for speeches, you'll see all kinds of things. It's good to see lots of different examples. The textbook provides examples. I have several examples in some of the outlines that I provided on our course page. So the idea is you write it as a full sentence, avoid figurative language, don't be too vague or general, just be very very specific. When you see them already written, they're like, oh, that's easy. I could write that. But when it's your own work and it's your own topic, it's more challenging. Like, what exactly am I going to inform the audience about? Central idea is the same difference as a thesis statement. I like the term central idea, thesis statement. That's the same difference. Personally, when I hear the word thesis, it just for me it just sort of triggers something where I think back to when I first started college and I heard everyone talk about this concept of a thesis statement. It just sounded like a word that just sounds so confusing, and it's like, oh my gosh, how do I summarize my whole idea in this one sentence? So I like the term central idea, same difference, right? Like, what's the main point, right? That's what the central idea is. It's a statement that summarizes the major ideas of a speech. So here's that acupuncture example again with a specific purpose statement. Now you see the central idea, right? The central idea is essentially a one sentence summary of the entire speech, of all the main points, and it's all done within one concise yet very detailed and comprehensive sentence. And this is one of the most important things that you can do to basically determine the degree to which you understand your topic. In other words, if you're all finished with your outline, you're all done with your development of ideas and the structure of the research. Now the question is, hey, now write your central idea. Sit down, write your central idea. I would say this is something that you do once you're all finished, or somewhere in between, or you can have sort of a working central idea statement. In other words, you might start it and then it might evolve and you might modify it over time because you're learning more information about your speech and you're making developments and you're making changes, etc. And then finally, when you're all done, you're like, okay, in one sentence, my whole speech is, although very different from Western medicine, acupuncture is effective in treating a wide range of conditions and is increasingly being used in combination with Western medical techniques. It's like, oh my gosh, that's an entire speech summarized in 10 seconds. Easier said than done. And it's kind of like if you're able to do that, then it's a way that ensures that it's one way to think about it is it's sort of ensuring that you know your speech really, really well. So it's sort of a litmus test. It's like a metric that indicates your level of proficiency in your overall ideas and structure and content of your speech. And then here you go. You see it all once again. This is an example I've shown you before. Slide 12. Informative. This is an informative speech about a person. The specific purpose statement. Very, very brief. That one I would say, if that were an outline turned into me, I would say the specific purpose statement should be a little more detailed. At least I know who the person is and what the structure is, right? Each main point is gonna focus on a major achievement. So you don't want to. You might be thinking, well, how thorough should I be in my specific purpose statement, or more specifically in my preview statement of the speech? How thorough should I be? Well, you wouldn't say in this speech I'm going to discuss how Frederick Douglass spent the first 20 years of his life as a slave in Maryland, and then you don't necessarily need to to spell out every single main point of your whole speech, but you want to have a preview. You want to give the audience a preview of here's what you can expect from this speech. It should be longer than 2 seconds. Give them enough information that they're like, okay, now I know what your topic is, and now I know the structure of what each main point is going to look like. Yeah, so that's another example. So developing your speech main points, let's say for the first one's informed, your general purpose is informing, your specific purpose is informing about chocolate, main points, the top, types of chocolates and other types of things as well. So the question is, how do I brainstorm? What the authors mention is conduct a personal inventory. Don't underestimate what you know. When you sit down and you start writing about things that you know about when you start writing topics that you know about, you start realizing, wow, I know so much information. There's so much in this brain of mine. But if you just sit there like this and you're like, let me think of a topic. Let me look at the assignment and let me just think really hard about a topic. Hey, you might come up with a topic that way, but one of the best ways to sort of stimulate that process and get that process going strategically is good old like paper and pen. Just take a pen or pencil out, take some sort of paper out, and just start writing things. Or if you don't like using that, then type. I like to type a lot. I just mostly what I do is type when it comes to writing. Um, Start doing a personal inventory of things that you know. If it's for the informative speech, look at like persons. It's person, event, or object. So persons, famous, historical, athletes, musicians, etc. Right? You just have different categories of persons, and then from those categories, you start writing in names of people without really thinking much. You don't need to go online. You don't need to go on Google. You don't use the internet. Just like without looking at anything, like after you've read these chapters and read the PowerPoint, listen to the PowerPoint, watch the video, and you're sitting down, you've read the assignment. You're like, all right, I got to come up with a topic. Well, you know the basics, right? Okay, person, event, or object, at least for your informative speech. So just you and the paper and the pencil. All right, just start writing out. And I'm not going to promise you anything, but more than likely, after doing this for just a few minutes, this isn't like several hours of lab research. Not that I'm like dissing lab research, but this is something that's a very short activity that can sort of this whole process of brainstorming, paper to pencil, sort of acts as a catalyst to bring all this information at the forefront of your mind, right? You have all this information on the hard drive of your brain, and this process of brainstorming, paper and pencil, thought bubbles, graphics. I've seen all different types of things that people do when it comes to brainstorming. You look at slide 15. As you're thinking, maybe brainstorming for you is you don't write any words, you write figures, you color emotions, you sketch. Like, doesn't matter to me how you do it, but just know that's the process of coming up with a really good topic that you really care about, that meets those criteria that the authors mentioned for giving a good speech. And then you narrow it, right? Once you get your topic, you narrow it. I got the 16 and 17, 18 different ways that you can brainstorm. The bottom line is you have to have some sort of brainstorming method. Over the years, every once in a while, I've had a student come up to me like the day before, several years ago, before I required speech topics to be turned in several weeks prior or several weeks before their speech. So years and years ago, I would have students come up to me literally the day before their speech, and they said, "Man, I'm stumped. I can't come up with a topic." And I'm thinking, okay, you're giving your speech tomorrow or like the next class period or something like that. And I said, well, what have you done in terms of brainstorming, like sitting down, paper and pencil, writing out your thoughts? And oftentimes they would look at me, and thankfully they're being honest, and they would say like, none, I haven't done any. And I was just like, so you can't think of anything, and you haven't done any brainstorming. They're like, yep, that's true. Now, this is not the case for everyone, but the point is you're more than likely not going to come up with a really good topic unless you do something like this brainstorming. So that's that. Choose a topic that you really want, and then you narrow it. The narrower the better. The main points. So what are the main points going to be about? Look at slide 19. What does your audience not know? So you have the topic, you're getting your information. What don't they know? What do you think they'd want to know? And then what information is most relevant? Those are some questions that should be sort of like filters or lenses in your mind's eye as you're looking through all of your research materials when you're coming up with a topic. So that's why I emphasize so much choosing a good topic, because it affects you, it affects the audience, it affects the whole process of developing the ideas and then the whole research component, which is the next chapter. So we're now moving on to chapter 7, research. Just to clarify, this is just water. It's a Moscow Mule type of copper mug, but it's just water inside. Water tastes really good in copper containers. Okay, on to research. Moving right along. So why do you need research anyways? Because the giving a speech is not just about sharing your opinion. This is not a class where you just go up and talk about what you know or talk about how you feel about things. It's one way to think about giving a speech is hopefully this will sort of demystify the whole process, but you're not being tasked with having to reinvent the wheel. You're not being tasked with having to like generate research and generate ideas and whatnot and come up with all your own stuff. Like, here's one way to really oversimplify. Here's my extreme oversimplification of doing a speech. You're just finding good information and you're sharing that with the audience, right? Now, that's oversimplification, finding information and sharing it, but that's kind of what you're doing. Your main goal is one of your main goals is find good information that follows the format and structure of what the authors talk about in chapter 7 in terms of finding good quality research and evidence, etc. So finding the research, making sense out of it, organizing it, etc., and then converting that information that you're extrapolating, all the information you're extrapolating from all those research sources. Now you're extrapolating that and putting it into a structured format that meets the requirements of the speech, right? You have a detailed outline, you have a beginning, middle, and end. And it's like you have the blueprints, right? You take all the information and now you're creating the blueprint, the structure, the format, what everything's going to look like, how are you going to say things. And then there's the practice. And in some ways, the practice of rehearsing your speech, in some ways, it's the absolute easiest part because there's no more reading, there's no more researching. You're done on you're pretty much done on the computer. And once you have it done, now it's just like, hey, now my sessions of working on my speech, if it's a 1-hour session, it's just me rehearsing. And hopefully you'll find like the fun in that in terms of, hey, at least I don't have like no more typing, no more writing, no more like heavy thinking. Now it's just, let's just practice this. Let's use my body, use my voice, use my gestures, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, so why do you need to research anyways? To support all these ideas. It's an option to make you look smart. It enhances your credibility. You're demonstrating to the audience, hey, I did my homework. This is not just my opinion, and here's how I know it, right? According to the research I did. And oftentimes students will actually share their research experience in very minor detail. Like, oh, as I was in the library or as I was reading this book on this topic, I came across this, this one chapter, or one of the authors mentioned yada, 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 right? If you're able to sort of organically and appropriately share some of your research experience embedded into the speech, then go for it. It definitely will enhance your credibility, and sometimes it just makes you feel more comfortable, like you're just sharing, like, oh, so I was reading this book and here's what I found, but you're doing that in a much more formal way. Okay, so what do you use? Right on the slide, I'm on slide 22. So there's so many different resources. My main suggestion is have a diversity. Utilize a diversity of resources. Books, periodicals, newspapers, magazines, scholarly journals, websites. Be very cautious with websites. I'll have some information on that in just a second. Expert testimony, and then maybe audio visual. So you might have let's say watched a movie or some sort of a documentary, and that's informing part of your research process. So there's so many. So one of the questions is, how do you know if something is good? How do you know if a source is scholarly or academic or credible? And sometimes it's hard, especially nowadays when you have fake news and alternative facts and all this kind of and all these types of things. You see these stories on your social media feeds or whatever sources of whichever outlets you use for getting information about what's going on in the world. Nowadays, when you look at, regardless of what you look at, regardless of which news outlet you're looking at, right now they're pretty much all saying the same thing. Like, most of what's out there is on pandemic and politics, right? Pandemic and politics and whatnot. Not to say that that's not important, but things look a lot different, way different now than they did, pre-pandemic. Regardless of the source that you're using. So when whatever source that you're considering, you'll need to apply the CRAP test. So it's a sort of a crafty acronym, and I borrowed this from a friend of mine who I used to work with as a teacher. So the CRAP test is currency, reliability, authority, and purpose. Reliability, relevance, purpose, or point of view. So if you're looking at a source and it doesn't really pass the CRAP test, then they'll leave it out. You definitely want to be, you know, thinking of this in terms of your source. If you get an article from a newspaper, like an LA Times article, Orange County Register article, or whatever kind of article it is, you want to be scrutinizing where you got that information. Don't just assume that because you read it online, it's true. I know you've probably heard that before, but just because somebody posts an online study about why one thing is causing something else, don't just assume that it's good research. Do some legwork and do some digging and find out, is this actually good? On to slide 24. So currency, depending on your topic, try to find information that is current as possible. If it's historical, if you're giving a speech on a person like a former president from over 100 years ago, okay, you don't need the most relevant stuff. But if it's anything dealing with science or technology or that type of thing, topics that deal topics that tend to have this sort of a revolving door in terms of advancements and what we know about them. It's always sort of changing. Yeah, you don't want to use something that's 20 years old if we're talking about the problems of smoking and lung disease, right? Because or let's say 40 years old with smoking. But nowadays, you look at if you do a Google search of, let's say, smoking, cigarettes, and lung diseases, you're going to find such different stuff right now that has been published in the last 2 years versus 20 years ago. And then reliability. This is one of the most important ones. Where does the information come from? The source, not so much not the author, but the source. What's the website? What's the book? What's the journal article, etc. Now, if you're getting information from a scholarly, peer-reviewed academic journal, that's sort of like the gold standard. If you're getting information from a peer-reviewed academic journal and the authors are competent and credible to speak on that topic or to write about the topic, it's like the gold standard, and for several reasons why. Well, briefly, to get something published in a peer-reviewed academic journal, there's a very rigorous process of what people scrutinize, and it goes through reviewers and gets rejections and gets you're told for things to be modified and so on and so forth. So it's kind of like, if something makes it into an academic peer-reviewed journal article that's published, it doesn't mean that it is gold, but more than likely, if you were a betting person, you could bet your money that that's going to be one of the most authoritative sources on that topic compared to a website or a newspaper article. Okay. Authority. That's another huge one. Who's the person? Who are the authors? Who's the person who wrote this information? What's their background? It almost feels like, oh gosh, I feel bad. I don't want to be critical of this person just because they don't have these certain credentials or degrees. And it's kind of, and if that's what you're thinking, I'll say to you, no, you should be. For one thing, for one time, it's good to be critical, right? In general, it's not good to criticize other people and whatnot. But for this, you want to be critical from a strategic perspective. If I'm looking at two different sources of information, and one, I look at the person's credentials and the person went to a certain school or has a certain reputation or covers certain stories, or they have publications and yada yada yada, versus someone else, and I'm like, I don't know anything about them. There's no information about them. Well, don't go with that person. Go with the one with all the credentials, because that's what you're doing. You're really trying to find out, who is this person? Why are they credible to speak on your topic? Oftentimes, if you get if you're looking at a newspaper article, even if it's just Orange County Register, and most of the time the articles that you'll get from a newspaper, it'll just be online. It'll just be like the online version of the article, and then you click on the author's name. A lot of times it'll show the journalist, or whoever wrote that piece. You click on their name, and sometimes their name is a hyperlink, and you can click on their name, and then boom, you have this little biography of this person, where they went to school, the types of topics that they cover, if they travel, if they've won any awards like in journalism, etc. That stuff is gold, right? And that's something that you might incorporate into your speech, but but you will definitely incorporate that into the annotated bibliography for your speech assignment. So in other words, don't just take someone's word for it. Like, look them up. How are they experts, etc. So one example I use is several years ago when my daughter was born and I started to make food. I started when she started eating solid foods. When my daughter started eating solid foods, we basically I started cooking it. So I made my own baby food. I made her own baby food. So I have a cookbook, and most of the cookbook is about regular things. And then the very last chapter is the chef who talks about, hey, you know what? When my son was born, I thought, hey, I tasted some baby food and it's disgusting, and so I just started to make my own baby food. So that's what I did. Started making my own baby food for my kids. I always use foil. I'd always put stuff on foil on sheet pans. I'd have an aluminum sheet pan. I put foil on top. I cook things in foil in the oven. Anyways, I'm going somewhere with this, okay? So anyhow, my wife posted a picture of something that I made on the foil, posted on Facebook. And then one of the comments was a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, left a comment and then posted an article that she had read. The comment had to do with, oh, I've heard it's not safe to use foil to cook with foil in the oven. And then she provided a link to a study that showed how cooking food in foil had a variety of negative effects. And so here's the thing: a situation like that, you could probably relate to a situation like that, where someone posts some article and they're like, a recent study found that cooking with foil is bad for you. It's bad for your health. It's bad to cook with food. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to do that again. But because I'm, being the true scholar that I am, the nerdy scholar that I am, I looked at that article and I was just like, first of all, I said, first of all, I didn't ask your opinion about the food that my wife posted on her Facebook page. I didn't ask for your opinion on our cooking method, but you provided an unsolicited opinion. I didn't say those things. That's just what I thought in my head. So I looked it up. I looked up her study. She provided the study, and it was a study. I read all the D's. I found the original article, the primary research, right? So what she was posting was secondary research. She read it. She read this article that's posted on some website, and then I looked in the fine print and I saw the authors of the original experiment. I looked it up. I found it. I read through their whole experiment. And it's not as though they lied, but they had a bad research design. They had the way that they tested this idea was done poorly. Specifically, if you're a research person or a statistics person, I would say that the major criticism of their experiment design is that it was compromising ecological validity. You don't need to know about ecological validity, but in other words, what they were doing in the lab definitely did not represent the way things are done in the real world. My point is, that would not be a good source to use on why cooking with foil is bad, because those no one knows who those people are. I don't expect you to be looking at original data and being able to criticize their experiment methods. My minor is research methods, is statistics. So that's why I'm able to do that. I don't expect you to do that, but at the very least, you should be cautious, right? And where you're getting this information from. And then the last one is purpose, point of view. That's a little bit easier. What's the purpose of the information? Does it appear to be biased? Who's the audience for? So on and so forth. So that's the CRAP test. Lots of information, lots of things to consider when you're taking something, when you're using something for your speech. There's all kinds of supporting material: personal experience, common knowledge, direct observation, people watching. I think the authors mentioned basically people watching. Maybe you're interested in a certain topic and you go to the mall, you go to some public place and you do some people watching, and it sort of confirms the feelings that you had about a certain topic, or it enlightens what you know, or something like that. Using examples, you can have hypothetical examples. A lot of speakers use hypothetical examples as supporting material to illustrate a point, to provide a context for their audience to be like, oh, okay, I get it. And a hypothetical example usually starts with imagine. Imagine going to the store. Imagine studying for an exam all day, right? It's a hypothetical example. That requires some creativity and sitting down and thinking, how do I exemplify this topic for my audience so that way they get it. It could be anecdotal or analogy, right? You can have an anecdotal sort of example. Documents. So when they say documents, obviously they're talking about like a journal article, a book, etc. Statistics, testimony. So these are all the things that make up your supporting points. Your main points are the main points, and then the big A, big B, big C, big D, little one, little two, little A, little B, little I, two little I's, all those things in the outline. Those are all subpoints, sub-subpoints, sub-sub-subpoints. Those are all the sources of your supporting material. Or rather, all of these different types of supporting material make up all of those Roman numerals. Hopefully that clarifies things a little bit. Where do you find the information? So how do you find this material? I'm going to give you a very, very, very small library workshop right now. So I have this for both Cal Poly Pomona and Cal State Fullerton. So I took some screenshots from the library's databases. You'll see they pretty much look exactly the same. So this first one on slide 27, this is what you'll find on Cal Poly Pomona's library database. When you go to the home page, and I think when you go to the CPP homepage, you click, if you just click on the search box, you don't have to type anything. You click on the search box, you see an automatic list populate, and you just click on library. If you can't find it, just type in library. You go to library, you click on the library's page, and then you'll see this one thing on the top, and you'll see it says one search for books, articles, and more, and then you'll see a little tab that says databases. What I highly recommend is you start there. Start with the dense, meaty stuff. Click on databases. You click on databases. The next page you get is that second photo where it says A through Z databases, et cetera, et cetera. And then what you'll see is that second option is Academic Search Premier. I recommend starting with Academic Search Premier. Academic Search Premier. It's very general, very it's kind of covering everything. But you can also just type in for specific books or articles and whatnot. You can look at different types of databases. There's all types of resources. There's so many resources that the library, that our university library provides, Pomona and Fullerton. Pretty much every college I've ever worked at, and I've worked at about 7 colleges total. For the most part, every college provides you so much information, so many resources at your fingertips, or phone call or email or something like that. And then you click on Academic Search Premier, and then boom, you get taken to this next slide, slide 28. By the way, you'll probably have to log in to the school's portal, your student portal, or something like that at some point. Slide 28. Now you're looking at a library database. EBSCO is just the search engine. So a lot of students will say things like, "Oh yeah, I found my article on EBSCO." It's like, well, no, you found the article. The article is not from EBSCO. The article is from Journal of Communication. You just found it on EBSCO. So EBSCO is like a very broad, it's like Google. You wouldn't say, "Oh, this information comes from Google." It's like, no, the information comes from the Journal of Sports and Nutrition or something like that. EBSCO is just the engine that the service that provides it for you. So now you start searching your terms. You need to get creative with your words, your search terms. Set up a strategic search. Work smart, not hard, right? So you can click on things where it says scholarly peer-reviewed journals. So you'll see that box on the right-hand column, kind of towards the middle. As you're typing in your search terms, maybe first just type in some search terms related to your topic, and then see what you get. Maybe you get like 100,000 hits. You get 100,000 different queries, right? And then you go down, and then you click on scholarly peer-reviewed journals, and it's going to, of course, filter out everything that's not from a scholarly peer-reviewed journal. And so you might go from 100,000 to like 1,000 or 500, right? Or not. The point is, set up a strategic search. Look at that. You can specify your language, the publication type, periodical, newspaper. If you're like, you know what, based on my topic, I really think I really want to focus on newspapers. Just focus on newspapers. Click newspaper. So I know this is not the most interesting topic, but the reason why I'm trying to seem interested is because this is the kind of stuff that I love doing as a grad student. I just love doing the research part because when I was, as long as I was doing the research and using the databases, that means I was not writing. That means I was not typing words. I was just clicking buttons. Um, and in my opinion, clicking buttons is really easy and you're accomplishing something. So set up a strategic search, take your time. If you don't find it right away, keep trying. Get creative with different databases. Now you can also click on that little, on the very top, you see where it says choose databases in blue. It's kind of a hyperlink. Click on that, and then you see a whole list of all these other subject-specific databases. And now you can set up a very strategic search. When you're looking at those subject-specific databases, you'll see like a little icon where you can take the cursor and hover over the icon of the thing that says um, like one of them says ERIC, E-R-I-C. It's an education database. You take the cursor and you hover over those things. It gives you a description of what that database is looking for. So choose strategically, choose wisely. When I was, as I mentioned before, I did some profanity research, and it's a topic that was very challenging to research because there's just not much on it, or at least when I was doing it, maybe like 10 years ago. When I was doing profanity research, I was like, man, there's hardly anything out there. And I was trying to find I was trying to find an intersection between profanity and athletic sports coaches. In other words, I wanted to know what people's perceptions were of athletic sports coaches who use profanity. I know it's a lot to take in. So there's lots of research. I mean, there's a adequate amount of research on profanity, not a ton, and then there's a lot of research on athletic sports coaches in terms of their performance, their leadership, their competency, all those types of things, right? But I was just like, yeah, but I want to find the two. I want to find articles that have looked at sports coaches who use profanity and what people think about them. Let me tell you something. I was looking high and low. I spent hours and hours and hours looking. I came up with all the search terms. I looked everywhere, and I kept coming up dry, it's like a dry well. And finally, I finally found something through setting up strategic searches. And the article was titled it was something along the lines of perceptions of basketball coaches who swear. And I was like, that's exactly what I was looking for. And that's the experience that I want you to have. I want you to take the time to really utilize the library's databases. It requires some patience. Take the time, utilize the library's databases. Don't give up. Keep searching for that article, or in the case of our informative speech, you need 4 sources. So try to find 4 sources where it's like, that's exactly what I was looking for. That is such a good source for my speech, because the better the source is for you, it makes your job so much easier. So I found really, really good sources for my profanity research. It made my job a lot easier. Still a lot of work, still a lot of reading, a lot of comprehension, a lot of note taking, etc. But I had good information. So the next one, 29, on 29, that's for Cal State Fullerton. Same kind of thing, right? You click on the thing that says databases. This is the main page of the library. You click on the link that says databases, slide 30. You're given a list of all the databases A through Z. You can actually search for unique databases. Maybe you want to look at sports databases or something like that. You can do that. Or click on Academic Search Premier, that second one down, and then slide 31. That's the first, same exact setup. It looks the exact same way. So that's how you set up a strategic search on our library's databases. The authors also talk about interviews. So nowadays, you might actually have an interview. Depending on your topic, if you happen to know someone that you know well, that knows you well, that's willing to give you their time for an interview, if they're an expert in a field, if they're an expert on a certain topic, they have like legitimate credentials on a topic. It's not something like, oh, they just know a lot about it. Although that might also be the case. Maybe you know someone in your family, your network, and they know so much about this topic, and they don't have any legitimate credentials. But if they say, yeah, I read 50 books on this topic, it's like, okay, well, that's not a what do you call it? an official credential, but if someone's read 50 books on a topic, they probably know a lot about it, regardless of their education. They just know a lot about that one topic. So maybe you set up an interview. Regardless of who you interview, if it's a family member, a friend, you still want to take this very serious, be professional, be competent. You want to take notes during the whole time. And then if you do plan to record it, if you do plan to record the interview, be sure that you ask permission before you start the interview. And I would say make sure you ask permission like several days before. In the initial email or the initial contact, if there's someone that you know, I like once they agree to the interview, I might say, hey, do you mind if I record it? Or if I'm on a phone call with them, I say, oh, okay, cool. Hey, so our interview set up for Friday at 10 o'clock. By the way, are you okay if I record it and then use that recording for my own purposes? You might just assume, well, that's my uncle, right? Or it's my family member that I've known forever. But um, you never know what someone might be thinking. Someone might be thinking, I don't want to be recorded. I don't like the way my voice sounds, or I don't want them to record this. I don't. It might be a violation of company policy or something like that. So make sure you ask, because if they say no, then that means you need to take that much better notes. Regardless of whether you can record or not, take really good notes. Taking really good notes is a very good skill to practice, to learn and to practice. Okay, I know this is a lot, but the reason why I have so much is because this is, the research component, finding good information. This is like one of the most important components of your speech. Once you have all your good information, once you have great sources, it makes the speech that much better. And in my experience of having done this for so long, for several years, and having seen thousands of outlines, what I have found is that the speech outlines that have really good sources and really good information from a variety of sources, those speeches tend to stick out in terms of being very easy to follow, very competent, very credible. The students seem to be more comfortable. And one reason why you might be more comfortable is because I've been reading expert stuff. I haven't just been reading some no-name person's random opinion about something. I'm reading expert material. So just be cautious. The authors give you some words of caution when using the internet on pages 147 to 148. Read through that stuff. That's really, really important. I give you an example of a website. So some students are like, wait, is this a web source? Is this an online source? If you're using a website as a source for your speech, here's one example of a good website with good information for that company. So I chose the one Raising Cane's. So if anybody is a vegan, or if you don't like chicken fingers, or if you have any negative feelings towards this topic, my apologies. But the purpose of using this example is to illustrate websites. So if you click on that company link, you'll find all kinds of information about the company, what they do, and all that kind of stuff. So if I were giving a speech on the topic of chicken fingers or fast food restaurants or something like that, and I'm using that as a source, I can go to their website and then find all kinds of information. Some websites you go to, if it's a website of a company, there's just not much information. So there's not much you can do with it. So be cautious of websites. If you're like, yeah, I can't find an author, I can't find any information when things were published or who published them, you might not use it, but you might scrap it, right? Keep it out. That's one that you scrap. I mentioned 4 sources are required for your first speech, the informative speech, but you might as well go ahead and get 6 or 7 or 8, because you might come across one where initially you saw the source, you read about it, you're like, okay, that's good. I'll save that in my sources folder. And then upon further inspection, you're looking at that source and you're like, yeah, that's not very good. So scrap that one. I have some information on how to do source citations. Slide 36. That's one example of how you might cite a source that you found online. So I have on slide 37. I have that reminder. It's not easy. The research is not easy. You have to be a critical thinker. You have to really be focused. So whenever you're doing this work, there's some types of work activities, work behaviors where you can there can be a lot of noise and background noise. Like for me, if I'm doing tasks here and there that don't require like a ton of critical thinking, and it's more like busy work. If it's busy work, I can deal with distractions. I don't have to be super focused. I still have to do the work. But for certain things, for some things, man, I gotta be really focused. I have to think really, really hard. That's the approach that you should have for the research component. Um, so slide 38, the authors talk about planning, page 148. Work smart, not work smart, not hard. So have a plan. Figure out what you're gonna do, how you're gonna do it. Have a preliminary bibliography, which is just a very, a small list of things. Do some cursory research on different topics or your different sources before committing to the source. Read the abstract, read the summary, glaze through it. Um, Take notes, read efficiently, read effectively, write all over your sources. If it's a book that you checked out from the library, then you probably can't write on it. You could take the book from the library, you could photocopy it, and then take notes on your photocopy. You could scan it to your computer and then take notes if you like to do things that way. But have a plan. Work smart. It's not all about getting quantity. It's not about quantity. It's about quality. So that's why I said what I mean by work smart, not hard. Um, be strategic in how you set up a search. So there's that. Sorry. And then note taking. That's slide 39. So note taking, the authors talk about note taking on page 151. Figure out a system that works for you. Be flexible, all that kind of stuff. The reason why I showed you a picture of kids taking notes or writing is because I wanted to remind you of that as you know, but for the most part, most of us, most college students, most of you have started taking notes from a very, very, very early age. Your teacher says things, you write them down. You're hearing about a topic, you write them down. Right? You do mental note taking, you do physical note taking. So as you're working on your speech, as you're reading through other resources, have note taking procedures for your resources, for your resources as you're reading through the articles, etc. Do something. Oftentimes for me, I do a pencil and a highlighter. I mean, honestly, like a pencil and a highlighter or a pen and a highlighter. Usually I use a pen, but that's all I can find. A pen, a highlighter, have your own system of scribbling on things, or you might as well just, for another thing that I would do is I would have my outline. I would have a skeleton outline open at all times as I'm working on my research. And a skeleton outline is just a blank outline. Look up the term if you're not sure. You have a skeleton outline, and as I'm going through my different sources, I find information from the source, and then I paraphrase. The authors talk about that in this chapter, in chapter 7. One of the best ways to get good with the material, to get proficient in the material, and to ensure that you're avoiding plagiarism is I'm reading about it in the book, in the article, in the website, etc. I'm like, boom, I'm going to go straight to my outline and then just type it out in my own words. I'm going to be paraphrasing what I just read, and then I put that there. And that might not be main point 1. Maybe in one source, I'm like, okay, that's main point 4 source or main point 3 source. I have all my resources out. In your case, you might only have 4 or 5. You have them out. It's kind of like, how do I take bits and pieces from the different articles and make them fit into this outline that follows the assignment for this. And then these last 3 slides, 40, 41, 42, I basically talk about, like, it's giving you sort of a picture of what you do with all the information, right? You've gone through the sources, you have information overload. There's so many details and facts and stories, etc. What do you do with it all? Well, you put it together. Here's some examples of how you might provide facts. So on slide 41, there's a statement: childhood obesity is a serious problem. I could generate that statement after having spent hours looking through my research, and I'm like, okay, all right, I spent hours reading all about this topic. Childhood obesity is a serious problem. If that's all I can come up with, that's all I got from spending hours reading about it, like, that's not enough. That's not going to cut the mustard. I gotta flesh that out in much more detail, right? Or maybe that's a main point, right? Childhood obesity is a serious problem. That's my main point. And then I might talk about, 15% of American children are obese, blah, 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 right? The point is, a very broad statement like that. There are a lot of big cities in China. Coffee is a very popular beverage. Those do not stand alone. Those need to be unpacked and fleshed out to provide a comprehensive understanding of the source of that information. You're not the source of the information, but you're the source of who is talking about that information from your experience of looking at all the sources and reading through the sources. Hopefully that helps. And then word pictures are always good to describe things. These are just sort of things to keep in mind in terms of how to develop a speech, how to develop the ideas. Ooh, a lot of information, and I know that was really long-winded and really, really detailed and thorough, but again, my goal is I want to equip you and teach you. I'm telling you how to do the speech in the best possible way, and the reason, again, the reason why I emphasize so much on research and the sources is because that's what it is. That's what this whole speech is about. I started off this lecture by saying a real oversimplification is you're finding information and you're sharing it. Garbage in, garbage out, right? If you don't have good information, you can't really output good information. If you're taking in stuff that's not very good, it's not going to come out very good, if that makes sense. I'm the student. If I'm taking in poor quality information, what's going to come out is poor quality information. I might still feel confident. I might still kind of follow the assignment. I might get a passing grade, but my hope is that you do spend the time to really invest in finding good information, good research. Let the other people work for you, right? Hey, there's already plenty of sources that people have already spent weeks, months, years working on, right? Weeks and months and years of working on something, and they finally got it published on some level, and now you're just reading that. You're reading the hard work of all this information, the hard work of what certain people did, and you're reading it in this nice little tight package that's like a 5-page article. It's like, how easy is that? Easier said than done, right? But again, that's another reason why it's so important to give credit where it's due. Imagine if you worked on something for 3 years and you finally got it published, and then someone else has used that information, presenting it as though it's their own, and they're not giving you the credit. You're going to be like, hey, I'm the one who came up with that information. Give me the credit. And of course, I might not ever know about it, but that's part of the logic of why it's so important to give credit to where credit is due. Okay, all done. So hopefully that was useful. Hope you're all doing well, and I'll talk to you later.